Rain blurred Maple Falls into soft shapes and smeared colors. By late afternoon, the blacktop outside the elementary school shone like dark glass, and the chain-link fence that ringed the playground glittered with beads of water. Luke Porter stood at the fence with his hands in his pockets, shoulders damp in his work shirt. Out on the playground, children ran and shouted through the mist. His eyes searched automatically until they found his daughter. Mia was easy to spot. She hung from the lowest bar of the jungle gym knees, hooked hair trailing toward the wet sand. Her mouth moved in a small, private song. She always hummed when she thought no one was listening. A gust of wind pushed a fine spray through the fence. Droplets clung to the metal links and turned the world beyond into a shifting curtain. Through that curtain, he saw her. The woman stood near the far corner, where the fence turned along the staff parking lot. Dark hair pulled back, long coat buttoned, a paper cup held close to her chest. She was not looking at her phone. She was not chatting with the small knot of parents by the gate. Her gaze was fixed on the playground. On Mia. Luke shifted his weight on the wet pavement. Maple Falls was small but not sealed off from the world. People drifted through. New teachers, visiting relatives. A few faces he did not know. Normally he forgot them by the time he started the truck. This woman did not feel like one of those. She did not fidget or check the time. She stood too still, eyes following a single 7-year-old girl hanging upside down in the rain. Mia dropped to her feet and spun toward the fence. When she spotted Luke, her whole face lit. She waved so hard her sleeve slid up her arm. With her other hand, she lifted a small stuffed fox, making it bounce like it was waving too. The toy was orange once, now faded, its ears rubbed flat. He raised his hand in return. For a moment, he let himself look only at her. When he glanced back toward the corner, the woman had moved closer. Not much, just a few steps. Enough that he could see more of her face now. Pale, tired. When their eyes met, the tightness low in his chest sharpened. She did not look startled to be caught staring. She looked like someone who had been waiting to confirm a detail and had just done it. Her gaze flicked from him to Mia and back, then dropped as if she had seen what she needed. The bell rang thin and electronic. Children drifted toward the gate, dragging backpacks through puddles. The woman stepped back with the crowd. For a second, she disappeared behind a cluster of parents, then reappeared on the sidewalk, walking past Luke. He caught a quick impression as she went by, the smell of coffee and rain, the way her fingers tightened on the paper cup when Mia laughed. Her eyes lifted briefly and met his. There was something in that look that troubled him. Not fear, not even guilt. A kind of quiet recognition, as if she could have said his name and chose not to. Then she was past him, boots tapping lightly on wet pavement, turning the corner and vanishing from sight. Mia reached him a heartbeat later, damp and warm backpack banging against his leg. "You were almost late," she said, muffled against his shirt. "I am exactly on time," he answered. "Ask the clock." She leaned back to study his face as she did every afternoon. Whatever she looked for, she found because she smiled. "Can we get hot chocolate?" she asked. "Please, I was very good at math today." "We will see what we can do," he said. She groaned at the answer but took his hand. The fox swung from her other hand by its tail. They crossed the lot to his old pickup under a dripping maple. As Mia climbed onto the seat, she buckled the fox in first, then snapped her own belt. "Safety," she told the toy. "Very important." Luke smiled despite the knot still sitting behind his ribs. He started the truck. The heater wheezed and began to blow lukewarm air. As the windshield cleared, he looked back toward the school. The playground was almost empty. The fence glittered with water. The woman in the long coat was nowhere. He pulled out onto the street. Main Street passed in a handful of slow blocks, hardware store, diner, coffee shop, grocery. He stopped long enough at the drive-through window of the diner to hand Mia a paper cup topped with whipped cream and a few marshmallows. By the time they turned onto their street, the light was already fading. Their house sat near the edge of town, one story with peeling paint and a porch that leaned a little to the left. The yard was a rectangle of wet grass and mud. Tonight, a narrow band of yellow showed at the living room window, soft against the gray outside. Inside, Mia kicked off her shoes in the hall and padded down the short corridor to her room, Fox clutched to her chest. Luke hung his damp jacket and followed. Her bedroom was small, a bed against the wall, a low dresser, a desk scattered with crayons and paper. On the dresser sat a nightlight shaped like a flame, its plastic surface glowing soft orange even though it was not yet dark. She had picked it out years ago. She refused to sleep without it. She never let him leave the curtains open at night. "Big day?" he asked. He asked, leaning against the doorway. Mia nodded, serious. "We had fire drill," she said. The alarm was really loud. It made my chest feel weird. "What did you do?" "We lined up," she said. "We went outside. It was raining. Some kids laughed." She hesitated, fingers stroking the fox's worn ear. "When it started, I smelled smoke," she added quietly. "Only for a second. I know there was none. It was just in my head." Luke walked over and sat on the edge of the bed. "Sometimes your head remembers things faster than the rest of you," he said. "Today there was only an alarm and some rain. That is all." "Are you sure?" she asked. He nodded. "I am sure." She studied his face, then let out a small breath. Some of the tension left her shoulders. "Will you close the curtains?" she asked. He went to the window. Outside, the streetlight across the road had already come on, its pale circle reflected in the wet pavement. There were no cars parked that did not belong, no one walking past, just the rain and the dark line of trees beyond. He drew the curtains together until the glass was hidden and the room felt smaller, contained. "Better," he said. "Better," she echoed. He switched off the main light. The little flame on the dresser glowed brighter by contrast, painting the walls with a low orange. For an instant, his chest tightened at the color. Then he reminded himself what it was. "Good night, kiddo," he said. "Good night, Dad." He pulled the door almost closed, leaving a narrow slice of light. In the hallway, he paused, listening to the small sounds of the house, the hum of the heater, the fridge cycling on the faint patter of rain on the roof. Inside these walls, everything was familiar. School drop-offs, garage shifts, bedtime stories. He clung to the shape of that routine like a life raft in water he did not trust. Outside, the rain kept falling on Maple Falls, soft and steady, as the town blurred again at the edges. The next morning came in gray again. Maple Falls woke under low clouds, the kind that pressed down and kept the day close to the ground. Luke was in the garage early. The wide door rolled up to let in the damp air. The concrete floor was cold under his boots. An old Ford sat half disassembled in the bay, its hood open like a jaw. The radio on the shelf played something soft from the 70s, washed thin by static. He liked the quiet of that hour, just the clink of tools, the smell of oil, and wet asphalt drifting in from outside. He could lose himself in the pattern of bolts and hoses, the familiar logic of engines that obeyed rules. Mia padded in wearing mismatched baongs and one of his old t-shirts that hit her knees. The fox hung from her hand, its head dragging along the concrete. "You forgot breakfast," she announced. "You forgot good morning," he said. She grinned and leaned into his arm for a second, then stepped back and squinted at the open engine. "Does it feel better?" she asked. "It will if I find the problem." "You always find the problem." He did not answer that. He reached into his pocket and pulled out 2 bills folded small. "Here," he said, "cafeteria pizza money. Do not trade it for slime or stickers." "I might," she said, but she took the money and tucked it into her backpack. Later, he drove her to school. She sang quietly in the passenger seat, watching raindrops chase each other across the window. When they pulled up to the curb, he watched her walk through the doors, backpack too big for her shoulders, Fox zipped safely inside. The day passed in the usual pattern: oil changes, brake pads, the slow drip of local traffic rolling through. People talked about the weather, the high school team a sale at the hardware store. No one mentioned strange women at fences. By late afternoon, Mia waited in the faded plastic seat of a shopping cart at the grocery store, swinging her legs and humming while Luke stood in line. The store smelled of coffee and oranges and the faint bleach of freshly mopped floors. He loaded bags into the back of the pickup, paper rustling, the sky hanging low overhead. The parking lot was a patchwork of puddles, streetlights, just starting to come on even though it was not yet evening. Mia traced patterns on the fogged window of the truck with her finger. Circles, a crooked house, a stick figure with 2 long arms. "Can we get cereal with marshmallows?" she called through the open door. "We already did," he said. "You put it in the cart when I was not looking." She giggled. "I am very sneaky." He turned to slide the last bag into place and felt it then. That small prickling at the back of his neck, the sense of being inside someone else's frame. Across the aisle of parked cars, a silver sedan sat with its engine off. The windshield reflected the dull sky, but the angle of the light let him see into the cabin. A woman sat in the driver's seat. The woman from the school fence. Her hair was dry now, pulled back from her face. Her coat was different, a shorter one, but her posture was the same. Still, collected, both hands resting on the steering wheel, though the car was not running. She was not looking at her phone. She was looking at his truck. For a few seconds he did not move. He watched her watching them, his hand still on the grocery bag. Mia kept drawing on the glass, unaware, humming a theme song from some cartoon. The woman's gaze shifted almost imperceptibly to the small shape in the passenger seat, to the girl drawing shapes in the fogged window. Her expression did not change. On the far side of the lot, a cart boy wrestled a line of carts back toward the entrance. A car backed out its engine, coughing. Somewhere a door slammed. The woman blinked bare and slow, then looked away. She reached for something in the passenger seat that Luke could not see. A file maybe, a folder. Then she was just a person in a parked car, eyes on her own lap face dim behind the glass. He closed the tailgate more firmly than he needed to. At home, the evening folded in the way it usually did. Homework at the small kitchen table. Spaghetti from a jar. One of Mia's drawings taped up on the fridge, adding another crooked house to the growing gallery. This one was different. The house was small, roof dark. Thick gray lines curled up from the roof like smoke or a storm cloud. In front of the house, a stick figure girl stood holding a bright orange scribble that had to be the fox. "What is happening here?" he asked, keeping his voice light. "That is us," she said. "That is our house. The lines are the cold sky." "Looks intense." "Cold sky feels heavy," she explained like it was obvious. He nodded and smoothed the paper at the edges before pressing the magnet down. After dinner, he ran the bath and sat on the closed toilet lid while she splashed. Steam fogged the mirror. The faint scent of the strawberry shampoo she insisted on filled the small room. "When I get big," she said, dunking the fox's tail carefully and then lifting it out again, "I will not be scared of fire drills." "You are not scared now," he said. "You just do not like loud noises." "And smoke," she added quietly. "There was no smoke today." In my head there was. He fell silent for a moment, watching the water move around her small hands. "Your mom did not like fire drills either," he said finally. "She said they always picked the worst times." Mia looked up sharply. "You never knew her in school," she said. "College," he answered. "They had drills there too." She accepted this, turned back to the fox, and focused on wringing out its tail. When she was done, he wrapped her in a towel, and she ran down the hall, her feet slapping the wood, leaving tiny wet prints. Later in her room, she curled around the fox under the blanket. The little flame-shaped nightlight glowed on the dresser, pooling orange light. He tucked the blanket around her. "Dad," she said, voice small in the dim room. "Yeah, that lady today." She frowned at the ceiling. "At recess." He felt his chest tighten. "The one who asked you questions?" She shook her head against the pillow. "No, the other one. The calm one with the dark hair." She paused, searching for the right words. She looked at me weird. "Weird how?" he asked. "Like when you see someone you used to know, but they are taller," Mia said. "Like she already knew my name and my favorite color and everything. Like she had known me for a really long time and I forgot her." The room seemed to tilt just a fraction. "You have never met her," he said. "I know," Mia said, her brow creased. "But that is how it felt." He did not answer. He reached out and smoothed her damp hair back from her forehead, a habit he could not shake. She closed her eyes under his hand. "It is just your imagination working overtime," he said after a moment. "Too many cartoons." "Maybe," she murmured. Within minutes, her breathing slowed. The lines on her forehead smoothed out. The fox's frayed ear rested against her cheek. Luke sat there a little longer in the orange glow, listening to the faint sound of the rain outside and the small sounds of her sleep. Then he stood and eased the door, partway closed. In his own room, he lay awake longer than he meant to. The image kept replaying the woman in the long coat, still behind the fence, still behind the windshield, eyes on his daughter like she was a problem to solve. He finally slid into an uneasy sleep. Morning came early, as it always did. He woke before his alarm, the light outside still blew. The house felt colder than usual. He pulled on jeans and a sweatshirt and padded barefoot down the hall. In the kitchen, he started the coffee maker, the machine coughing and clicking as it warmed. While it gurgled to life, he opened the front door to grab the paper. Cool air slipped in. The porch boards were damp against his feet. On top of the folded local paper lay a white envelope. It sat very straight on the mat parallel to the door. No stamp, no return address, just his name on the front in dark, blocky type. He picked it up. The paper felt heavier than it looked, slightly rough under his fingers, and carried the faint smell of cigarette smoke that did not belong in his house. For a second, he stood there on the threshold, looking out at the quiet street. A dog barked somewhere down the block. A pickup turned the corner at the far end and rolled away. No one walked by. No car idled nearby. He closed the door, thumb already working under the flap of the envelope, the kitchen filling with the first hiss of the coffee machine. He slid a finger under the flap and tore it cleanly. Inside was a single sheet of white paper, folded once. He unfolded it on the kitchen counter beside the empty mug. 8 words sat alone in the center of the page, typed in a dark, rigid font. A lawyer is watching you for a reason. Luke stared at the sentence until the letters lost their shape. His first thought was that it was stupid, cryptic, like something from a movie that did not know how real people talked. His second thought landed lower and heavier. The woman at the fence. The woman in the sedan. He read it again slower. A lawyer. Someone had chosen that word on purpose. Behind him, the coffee maker clicked. The smell of brewed coffee crept into the room and did nothing to steady him. He flipped the paper over. The back was blank. He held the envelope to the light. No watermark, no return address, no postmark in the corner. The only mark on it was his name centered and typed like the words inside. Footsteps padded in the hall. He folded the paper once, then again, and slid it into the pocket of his sweatshirt. Mia shuffled into the kitchen, hair sticking out on one side, Fox pressed against her cheek. "I smelled coffee," she said. "That is because you have a superpower," he said. "Sit. I will get you cereal." She climbed onto a chair, dropping the Fox on the table, so its glass eyes stared at the ceiling. He poured cereal into a bowl, added milk, and slid it over. She took one spoonful and frowned. "This tastes the same as yesterday," she said. "That is how cereal works. It should taste like Saturday. It is Tuesday." She sighed and ate anyway. He moved through the motions of the morning, packing her lunch, reminding her to brush her teeth, signing the permission slip crumpled at the bottom of her backpack. All the while, the folded paper pressed against his side like a stone. On the drive to school, he checked the mirrors more often than usual. Every car behind them looked ordinary. No silver sedan, no dark figure. He pulled up to the curb. Teachers in bright rain jackets stood under the awning, shepherding kids inside. "Pick you up at 3, he said. "Do not be almost late," she told him. "I will be exactly on time." She smiled, then stepped out of the truck, her backpack too big, and Fox zipped halfway inside. She ran up the walk, the hood of her jacket bouncing. He watched until she disappeared through the doors. Only then did he pull away. The rest of the morning, the letter stayed in his pocket while he worked. He changed oil and rotated tires. He answered a couple of calls. He nodded at jokes from regulars that he did not hear. During a lull, he sat on the low stool by the tool chest and unfolded the paper again. A lawyer is watching you for a reason. There were 4 lawyers in Maple Falls. He knew because he had driven past their offices 100 times without really seeing them. One dealt with wills and property. One did divorces and criminal defense. One had an office full of dusty framed diplomas and kept odd hours. And one was new. Her sign had gone up a few months back, above a narrow doorway on Main. He had noticed it once. Rowan Legal Services, simple black letters on a frosted pane. He remembered because he had liked the clean look of it. Rowan, Claire Rowan. He folded the letter again, more sharply this time. At lunch, he locked the garage and walked the 2 blocks to the post office. The rain had thinned to a mist that hovered just above the ground. The sidewalk smelled of wet concrete and the faint mineral tang that came with it. The post office was a squat brick building with a glass door that stuck when it got damp. He tugged it open and stepped inside. Warm, dry air met him, smelling of paper, ink, and the faint residue of old tape. A row of metal post office boxes lined one wall. A counter ran along the back, behind which sat a woman in a blue cardigan reading a magazine between customers. He waited until the older man in front of him finished buying stamps. Then he stepped up and set the envelope on the counter. "Morning, Luke," the clerk said. "What can I do for you?" "Morning, Janet." He tapped to the envelope. "This show up in my box or get dropped on my porch." She picked it up, turned it over in her hands. "No box number," she said. "No postmark. We did not process this." "So somebody hand-delivered it," he said. "Looks that way. Last night or early this morning, you got cameras outside." She smiled a little. "You know the answer to that." He did. The budget in Maple Falls was thin. The post office had a bell on the door and a lock that never got changed, but no cameras. Janet slid the envelope back to him. "Somebody wants your attention," she said. "Seems like it," he replied. The glass door opened behind him. He heard the small rush of cooler air and the faint jingle of the bell. He did not turn right away. He folded the envelope and the letter together and held them in one hand, thumb pressed along the crease. "Anything else?" Janet asked. He shook his head and stepped aside. "Excuse me?" a woman's voice said. He knew it before he turned. The tone, calm, low, with an edge of something that could have been tiredness or could have been control. He looked. Claire stood a few feet away, a small cardboard box in her arms. She wore a dark sweater and jeans, her hair pulled back from her face with a simple clip. Up close, she looked younger than he had expected and older at the same time. There were faint lines at the corners of her eyes, as if she squinted a lot at details. For a moment, her attention was on Janet as she slid the box onto the counter. "Afternoon," she said. "I need tracking and signature on this, please." "Sure thing," Janet said, pulling a form toward her. As Claire reached for the pen, her gaze flicked sideways. It landed on the folded paper in Luke's hand. The edge of the letter showed just enough for the block letters to be visible. "A lawyer is watching you for a reason." Her hand jerked. The pen slipped from her fingers and hit the counter, then the floor. Janet bent to pick it up. Claire did not move. Her eyes locked on the words. The color drained from her face so quickly, he could see it happen like watching a dimmer switch turn down. Her jaw tightened once, then relaxed. When she finally looked up at him, something naked flashed in her expression. Not the calm distance he had seen by the fence, not mild curiosity. For a heartbeat, he saw straight fear. "Problem?" Janet asked, straightening. "No," Claire said too quickly. "Slip out of my hand." Her voice was steady again, but her hand, when she took the pen back, shook just enough to make the signature on the form come out thinner than it should have. Luke did not look away. He let his eyes rest on her face on the way she would not meet them now. He turned the envelope so the flap faced his palm. "Busy morning?" he asked, casual on purpose. "Stin me din purpose, masashtematiz." Claire nodded without looking up. "Always something," she said. He studied the side of her profile, the line of her jaw. He wanted to ask if she had written the words, if she knew who had. Instead, he heard himself say something else. "You a lawyer in town, right?" She glanced at him, then quick and sharp. "That is what the sign says," she replied. "Maybe you are the reason," he said. He lifted the envelope just enough that it was clear he meant the sentence printed inside. Her eyes flicked to the folded paper, then back to his face. For a second, he thought she might answer directly. The corner of her mouth twitched in something that was not a smile. "You should not carry that around where people can read it," she said quietly. "Why not?" he asked. Her attention dropped to the form again. She wrote her name, slid the box toward Janet, and only when she was done did she speak. "Because whoever sent it wanted you unsettled," she said. "Looks like it is working." Then she picked up her receipt, gave Janet a polite nod, and turned toward the door. She walked past him close enough that he caught the faint smell of her shampoo, something clean and sharp, close enough to see a faint pale mark on the inside of her wrist, the tail end of a thin curved scar that disappeared under her sleeve. The bell jingled as she stepped outside. The door closed behind her with a soft thud. Janet rang up the next customer. Luke stood there a moment longer, the letter warming in his hand. Back at the garage, he dropped into the chair by the desk and opened the ancient computer with its sluggish screen. The cursor blinked in the search bar while he thought. He typed Maple Falls Attorneys and hit enter. 4 names appeared in the search results. He scanned past the familiar ones and stopped on the new listing. Rowan Legal Services, Personal Injury, Civil Claims Insurance Disputes. Below that, an address on Main Street and a local number, Insurance Disputes. He sat back and rubbed a hand over his jaw. The insurance claim on the house in Seattle had been hanging for months. Phone calls that ended in vague promises. Letters that said they were still reviewing the case. He picked up the phone on the desk. His thumb hovered over the keypad for a moment. Then he dialed the number from the website. The line rang twice. "Rowan Legal Services," a voice answered. Calm, low, the same voice he had heard in the post office now filtered through a cheap handset. "Hi," he said. "I am calling about a possible insurance matter." There was a tiny pause on the other end, barely a breath. "All right," she said. "We can take a look. Do you have a policy number?" He did. He read it off from a folder on the shelf, the numbers worn at the corners from how many times he had handled it. She wrote them down. He could hear the scratch of pen on paper. "I have some availability tomorrow afternoon," she said. 3 o'clock. Does that work?" He looked at the calendar pinned to the corkboard. The space was mostly empty. 3 is fine," he said. "I will need copies of whatever correspondence you have had with the carrier," she added. "Bring everything. We can sort through it here." "All right. Name?" she asked. "Luke Porter." There was another small pause, then the faint sound of keys on a keyboard. "All right, Mr. Porter," she said. "We will see you tomorrow at 3. She gave the address, though he already knew where her office was. After he hung up, he sat there a long moment with the phone still in his hand. The letter lay on the desk in front of him. He unfolded it one more time, read the single line, then folded it again and slipped it into the file with the insurance documents. The folder closed with a soft thump. Outside, the clouds shifted a little. Light pushed through in thin strips that caught on the wet hoods of cars in the lot. In the garage, the radio hummed low. Luke stood, picked up a wrench, and went back to work. The next day, the clouds sat lower over Maple Falls, flattening the roofs and blurring the hills. By mid-afternoon, the town looked like it had been drawn in pencil and then smudged with a thumb. Luke parked along Main Street in a spot where the paint of the curb had long since worn away. Across from the diner and 2 doors down from the barber, a narrow doorway cut into the front of a brick building. Frosted glass filled the upper half of the door. Black letters floated on it. Rowan Legal Services. The stairs beyond the door rose at a sharp angle. He held the door with one hand and looked back at the truck. Mia hopped down from the passenger seat, hugging the Fox to her chest, her sneakers landing in a shallow puddle. She skipped across the sidewalk, splashing once, and slid into the stairwell with the quickness of someone who enjoyed new hallways. "Careful," he said. "I am," she answered, already climbing. The stair treads were worn smooth at the center. The air inside smelled faintly of old carpet and lemon cleaner. At the top, a landing opened onto 2 doors. One had a "For Lease" sign taped crookedly in the window. The other showed the same frosted glass and neat lettering as the street door. He knocked once, then turned the knob. The office was smaller than he had pictured. 1 room with a desk near the window, 2 chairs in front of it, a short row of filing cabinets along the far wall. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead with a thin, persistent hum. The blinds on the single window were half open, letting in a gray wash of daylight. Claire sat behind the desk, a laptop open in front of her, a stack of papers to one side. She stood as they entered. "Mr. Porter," she said, "come in. And this must be Mia?" Mia tightened her hold on the Fox, studying her. "You can call me Luke," he said. "All right." She nodded, then gestured to the chairs. "Have a seat." Mia looked at the chairs, then at Luke. "You can sit there," he told her. "I will be right next to you." She climbed into the chair furthest from the desk and swung her legs, sneakers not quite reaching the floor. He took the one closer to Claire. The seat creaked under his weight. Claire sat again, reaching for a legal pad. Up close, he could see faint shadows under her eyes, the kind that did not come from one bad night of sleep. She pushed a strand of hair back behind her ear and picked up a pen. "Do you mind if I ask a few background questions first?" she said. "That is why we are here," he replied. She glanced at the manila folder he had set on the desk, the one with the insurance policy and the correspondence. Then her gaze shifted back to him. "This pertains to the fire at your previous residence outside Seattle," she said. "Yes." She uncapped the pen. The metal clicked in the quiet room. "Date of loss," she said. "October 12th, he answered. 6 years ago." Her pen moved across the page neat and straight. When he said the year, something flickered at the corner of her mouth. Not surprise exactly, more like confirmation. "And the carrier is Silver Beacon," she said, though the logo was on the first page of the file. "That is right." She wrote that down too. Mia had pulled a few sheets of scratch paper from a stack at the corner of the desk. She found a pen that had rolled near the blotter and began to draw a tongue caught in the corner of her mouth. Claire noticed. "There are colored pencils in that drawer," she said, nodding toward the small filing cabinet near Mia's chair. "If you want them." Mia slid off the seat, opened the drawer with both hands, and found a shallow plastic tray of short, colored pencils. She carried it back like treasure and began to arrange them by color. "Thank you," she said without looking up. "You are welcome," Claire replied. Her gaze returned to Luke. "You filed the claim how long after the fire?" "Within a week," he said. "The adjuster came out, did his report, then nothing moved. They keep saying they need more time to review. They have been saying that for a while." Her pen paused. "How long is a while?" "Over a year since the last real update," he said. "The file has been open a lot longer than that." She pressed the pen to the paper and wrote something short. "Have they ever given a clear reason for the delay?" she asked. "They send letters that might as well be blank," he said. "They talk about needing further investigation. They act like there is a question about what happened." He heard his own voice tighten. "The fire department called it accidental." She looked up when he said that really looked as if weighing whether to ask more. "Did you keep a copy of the fire report?" she said instead. "Right here," he said, tapping the folder. "Everything I have is in there." "We will go through it together," she said, line by line. Her tone stayed neutral, professional. He noticed, though, that when she said the word fire, the hand holding the pen gave a tiny twitch, the line of ink on the pad thickening for a fraction of an inch. In the chair beside him, Mia had started another house. This one had a roof, a door, and a square window. Gray pencil rose from the roof in curling lines. "Tell me about the night itself," Claire said. He stared at the pad of paper on her desk, but in his mind he saw the flash of lights, the spray of water, the black skeleton of the house in the morning. "I was at work," he said. Garage stayed open late on Thursdays. Mia was with my sister. Julia was home. By the time I got the call, the place was already half gone. Claire did not look away as he spoke. She did not offer sympathies or interruptions. The pen moved, but her attention stayed on his face, as if she were matching every word to something in her head. When I got there, he went on, they would not let me close. Flames were still coming out of the roof. There was smoke everywhere. The neighbors were in the street. Sirens. You can probably imagine the roar. I would rather you tell me, she said quietly. He told her the pieces he could say out loud, where Mia had been, how long it took to find Julia in what was left of the bedroom, how the official words on the report did not line up with the gut punch of walking that lot in daylight later. While he spoke, Mia's pencil moved over the page, the sound a faint scratch in the stillness. The gray smoke over the house grew darker. At one point, Mia looked up as if she could feel him watching. Is this okay? She asked, holding up the page. The house leaned slightly to one side. The smoke lines were heavy. In the small square window, she had drawn 2 dots and a curved line, a simple face looking out. It is fine, Luke said, flexing his jaw. You are a good artist. Claire glanced at the drawing. For a second, her gaze snagged on the window and the face behind it. She blinked, then looked back at her notes. Mr. Porter, she said, have you ever shared photos of your previous home on social media or public sites? Her tone had shifted slightly lighter, as if the question were routine. No, he said. I barely remember my password for email. We took pictures, sure, but they were on a laptop. That went with the house. You did not have any printed copies. 1 or 2 in a box that came from the old place, he said. Most of those are of Mia, not the house. She nodded, making a few more notes. All right. I will need to review the policy language and their correspondence. I can reach out to the carrier afterward. So you think you can help, he said. I think the amount of time they have taken is unusual, she replied. I do not like unusual without a reason. Her delivery was flat, but under it, he heard something else. Annoyance, maybe, or familiarity. Behind him, the fluorescent light buzzed louder, then dimmed for a heartbeat before returning to normal. The window rattled lightly as a gust hit the glass. Mia climbed down again to tug the blinds open another inch. She liked to look out of windows, even when all there was to see was a wet street and the side of another building. From his chair, Luke could see a sliver of Main Street through the eep. Cars idled at the light. The diner's neon sign flickered. The glass of the office window held a faint double reflection. The street outside and the room behind him layered over each other. In that reflection, he saw himself and Mia and Claire, small and ghostly. Ms. Claire, Mia said suddenly, not taking her eyes from the glass. Why are you scared of my dad? The room went very quiet. The fluorescent buzz settled into the edges of the silence. Claire's pen slipped from her fingers and clattered against the desk. The sound was sharp, out of proportion. I am not scared of anyone, she said after a heartbeat, bending quickly to pick it up. Her voice was light, almost amused, but the color had risen along her neck. I am just very busy with all this paperwork. It makes my face serious. Mia turned and studied her with the intense focus only children had. You looked scared at the post office, she said. When you saw the paper. Luke exhaled a breath he had not realized he was holding. What paper? Claire asked too quickly. The one with the letters, Mia said. Dad put it in his pocket. Luke cut in. Enough, kiddo, he said a little sharper than he meant to. Let Ms. Rowan work. Mia subsided, sliding back into her chair. The fox sat on her lap like a small, patient animal. She picked up a blue pencil and started coloring the sky above her smoke. Claire capped her pen and set it down with deliberate care. I think I have enough for now, she said. If you can leave the file with me, I will review it and contact Silver Beacon. We will schedule a follow-up. Luke hesitated, then nudged the folder toward her. Everything is in there, he said. Letters, emails, the report. I will take good care of it, she replied. He nodded and stood. The chair creaked again. Mia slid off her seat, clutching the fox. She gathered her drawings into a messy stack and pressed them to her chest. Say thank you, he reminded her. Thank you, she echoed. You are welcome, Mia, Claire said. You can keep the pencils next time, too. Can I draw a different house? Mia asked. If you want, Claire said. Luke moved toward the door and reached for the handle, then patted his pockets with a frown. Hang on, he said. I think I left my phone. He turned back toward the chairs and bent over them, running a hand between the cushions. From that angle, his line of sight shifted. Behind the desk along the far wall stood a heavy gray filing cabinet. Claire had already moved from her chair. She crossed the small space and opened the bottom drawer. "I will put your file here for now," she said. He straightened, just enough to see over the edge of the desk. The drawer yawned open, revealing a row of manila folders. Her fingers chose one from a small stack sitting on top. For a second, it was fully visible. Black letters ran along the tab in a neat printed line. Project Ember, subject Amelia Porter. The folder sagged slightly in her hand, and a corner of a photograph slipped free. He saw a small girl in a yellow dress standing in front of a house with white siding and dark shutters. The girl held an orange stuffed fox by the leg. Behind her, a large front window reflected a sky turning orange at the edges. Then the folder disappeared back into the drawer, and the drawer slid shut with a dull metal sound. Luke found his phone under his chair. His hand was suddenly cold around it. "Got it," he said. "Good," Claire answered from behind the desk. "If you think of anything else about the night of the fire, write it down. Small details can matter." He looked at her and tried to keep his face neutral. "I will," he said. Out in the hall, the air felt thinner. He let Mia go ahead down the stairs, watching her hop from step to step, the fox bumping against her knee. The image of the photograph would not leave his mind. Mia at 3 in the yellow dress Julia had loved, standing in front of their old house. He knew that picture. He knew because he had taken it on a spring afternoon when the light had hit the porch just right. He had never printed it. It had lived on the laptop in the Seattle house until the night fire took everything. At the bottom of the stairs, Mia turned. "Dad," she said, "are we still getting hot chocolate?" "Yeah," he said, his voice sounding distant to his own ears. "Yeah, we are." He opened the door to Main Street. Cool air and the smell of wet pavement rushed in. The glass behind him reflected the three of them. For a moment, then the door swung shut. They walked 2 blocks to the diner because Mia would not let the idea of hot chocolate go. The pavement was slick, and she hopped from dry patch to dry patch, pretending the wet spots were rivers she could not step in. Inside the diner was warm and smelled of coffee frying onions and something sweet on the griddle. A waitress in a faded red apron wiped down a table and nodded at them. "Booth or counter?" she asked. "Bestätigt." "Booth," Mia said at once. They slid into the vinyl booth by the window. Raindrops clung to the glass, blurring Main Street into streaks of gray and red taillights. Mia pressed her nose to the cold pane, breathing fog onto it, then drew a crooked heart with her fingertip. Luke ordered coffee for himself and hot chocolate with whipped cream for her. When the drinks came, Mia dipped her finger into the whipped cream and licked it off, eyes closing for a second in concentration. "You are quiet," she said after a while, spoon clinking in her cup. "Thinking," he answered. "About the lady?" He hesitated. "About the fire," he said instead. She nodded as if those two things were not separate in her mind. By the time they left, the streetlights had come on. The sky pressed closer, the air sharper. He drove them home, cooked something quick, helped with homework that was mostly drawing weather patterns. When the sun vanished completely, the little house near the edge of town gathered its light in. Mia fell asleep fast that night, curled around the fox. He stood in her doorway for a long moment, watching the small rising and falling shape under the blanket, the glow of the nightlight painting the room in its quiet orange. In the living room, he picked up the remote, set it down again, and instead reached for his keys. He called the neighbor Mrs. Grady, who lived 3 houses down and never slept before midnight. She answered on the second ring. "Could you listen for Mia for an hour or two?" he asked. "She is asleep. I will lock up. Just need someone next door." "Of course," she said. "If she wakes and cries, I will call you. Where will you be?" "Town," he said. "Something I forgot." She came over in her wool sweater and heavy socks, settled on his couch with a crossword. Satisfied that Mia would be safe, he stepped back out into the cold. Main Street was almost empty now. The diner's neon sign hummed softly. The barber's lights were off. He drove past the building with the Rowan Legal sign in the window and turned into the narrow lane that ran behind it. The back lot was small, a strip of cracked asphalt, a dumpster near the alley, a few lined spaces. One belonged to a florist that had closed hours ago. One belonged to Claire. Her sedan sat under a weak security light that tinted everything a sickly yellow. The rest of the lot fell away into shadow. A light still burned in one of the second-floor windows above. He turned off his engine and let his eyes adjust. The drizzle had turned to a fine mist that hung in the air, catching the light like dust. He stepped out quietly and settled beside the dumpster back against the cool metal. From there, he could see the back door of the building and the bottom of the stairs that led up to Claire's office. He checked his watch. The minute hand crept. He listened. A distant car, a dog barking down another street, the occasional sound of a truck on the highway beyond town. Here, in this small pocket, there was only the faint hum of the security light and the drip of water from the edge of the roof. After 20 minutes, the light in the upstairs window went off. A few seconds later, the back stair creaked. The door opened with a soft click. Claire stepped out, a dark coat over her clothes, her bag slung across one shoulder. She pulled the door shut behind her, checked the knob, then turned toward the lot. She walked quickly, her steps steady but not hurried, keys in her hand. When she passed within a few feet of the dumpster, Luke stepped away from it. "We should talk," he said. She stopped sharply. Her other hand tightened around the strap of her bag. The security light threw a pale circle over both of them. "Is this your idea of a normal conversation setting?" she asked after a moment, her voice low. "You put my daughter's name on a file called Project Ember," he said. "We are past normal." Her mouth pressed into a line. "That file is not new," she said. "It did not start in that cabinet." "Where did it start?" he asked. She looked past him toward the shadowed edge of the lot, as if expecting someone else to step out too. "It is complicated," she said. "Try me," he replied. She exhaled, breath visible in the cold air. "Before I came to Maple Falls," she said, "I worked on cases involving large loss claims. Files moved through a lot of hands. Some came with a history. History, like a 3-year-old picture that should not exist," he said. Her eyes came back to his. "What did you see exactly?" she asked. "Her name," he said, "Amelia Porter. And a photo from before the fire that I never printed. It was on a laptop that does not exist anymore." Claire's fingers tightened around the keys, the metal biting into her palm. "Sometimes investigators preserve independent copies of materials," she said, "in case originals are destroyed." "Who investigated my family?" he asked. Silence stretched thin and taut. "A private firm," she said finally, "based out of Seattle. They do work for carriers and for corporations. Greystone Risk Solutions." "Never heard of them," he said. "They prefer it that way." He took a step closer. The light caught the pale scar on her wrist again. It looped in a half circle like a mark left by something hot. "Did you work for them?" he asked. "For one case," she said. "It was enough." "My case," he said. She did not answer, but the set of her shoulders answered for her. "So, you had my daughter in a file before you even moved here," he said. "You had a picture that should have died in that fire, and you want me to believe you just happened to show up at her school, at the grocery store, at the playground." "I did not say anything about chance," she said. Her voice had changed softer and harder at the same time. "I moved here because of that file." He felt something sharp and cold settle in his chest. "Why?" he asked. "Because it did not end where it was supposed to," she said. "Because certain people do not close books. They just move them to different shelves. Because your family stayed on a shelf that should have been empty." "Who are these people?" he asked. Her gaze flicked toward the dark again. A car moved along the street beyond the lot, its headlights sliding briefly over the brick wall before vanishing. "If I say their name out loud in this lot," she said quietly, "it does not help you." "You think keeping me in the dark does?" he shot back. "No," she said. "I think it delays how quickly they notice you are looking." Her words hung between them, cold as the air. He realized his hands were clenched. He forced them to open. "Whatever is in that file," he said, "you give me a straight answer about it, now. Or I walk into the sheriff's office in the morning and put your name on his desk with everything I have seen." Her jaw worked. For a second, anger flickered behind her eyes, not at him, but at the shape of the situation itself. "The file was given to me," she said, "by someone who wanted it protected. I did not create it. I did not ask for it. I did not refuse it." "Who?" he asked. "I cannot tell you that." "Cannot or will not?" "Cannot," she said. "Not yet." "That is not good enough," he said. "I know," she replied. The honesty in those two words caught him off guard. She seemed smaller suddenly, not in height but in weight, as if she had been carrying something heavy for a very long time, and her arms were finally shaking. "You have every right to be furious," she said. "You have every right to demand answers from me, but you also have someone else's attention on you, someone who is not standing in this lot trying to explain herself." He stared at her, trying to decide if he believed any of that. "What did you mean, someone else?" he asked. "There are other eyes on Maple Falls than mine," she said. "On you, on Mia. They have more resources and fewer rules." "You are telling me my daughter is being watched by more than one stalker," he said, "and you think that information does not need names attached." I am telling you that tonight is not the night to say those names, she said. He stepped back, jaw tight. Then why are you here? He asked. What are you trying to be exactly? A guard dog? A scout? A ghost with a law degree? She let out a short breath that might have been a laugh if there had been any humor in it. I am trying to be a buffer, she said. I am trying to stay between you and something worse. The security light hummed on above them. Moisture hung in the air like fine smoke. Somewhere nearby, a car door closed. Music floated faintly and then cut off. He wanted to demand again, to shove her toward the nearest badge and be done with the guessing. But the image of that impossible photograph sat in his mind beside the memory of the letter on his counter, the sentence typed in stiff black font. A lawyer is watching you for a reason. Go home, Mr. Porter, she said finally. Lock your doors, keep your curtains closed. I will call you when I have something more than half answers. You do not tell me how to protect my house, he said. Then do it your way, she replied. Just do it. She walked past him toward her car keys, clenched shoulders tight. He watched her unlock the sedan, saw the interior light glow briefly, then shut off as the door closed. The engine turned over, headlights flared against the brick, and then she backed out and pulled away, taillights shrinking until they were gone. He stood in the empty lot a few seconds longer, listening to the quiet. Then he went back to his truck and drove home. By the time he returned, it was past 10. Mrs. Grady was still on his couch, glasses low on her nose, the crossword finished in neat blue ink. All quiet, she said as she stood. She did not stir. He thanked her and walked her to the door. The night outside felt thicker now, the dark pressing up against the porch light. He checked the locks twice before he went to bed. Sleep did not come easy. When it did, it was shallow, full of half-formed images. Smoke without source, faces behind glass, the flash of a yellow dress on a porch that no longer existed. He did not know what time he finally drifted off for real. He knew exactly when he woke. The knock came sharp and sudden, jerking him upright. 3 hard hits against the front door, then 3 more closer together. No doorbell, just solid flesh on wood. He grabbed the phone, saw the glowing numbers on the bedside clock, 11:43. He slid his feet to the floor and reached for the aluminum baseball bat propped against the wall. The house was quiet. Mia's room down the hall glowed faintly under the door, the nightlight casting its orange slice. He moved down the hall, bare feet silent on the cold hardwood. The knock stopped as he reached the entryway. He pressed his eye to the peephole. The porch was empty. The streetlight across the road cast its pale circle on wet pavement. Rain ticked lightly on the railing. He opened the door slowly, bat in his right hand. Nothing. Just the porch boards slick and shining, and the yard beyond a darker shape against the sky. He stepped out, heart drumming in his throat, and looked left, then right. At the end of the short gravel driveway, near the mouth that opened onto the street, someone moved. Claire stood there under the streetlight, one hand braced on her knee, as if she had been running. Her hair had come loose from its clip. Her coat hung open over a dark sweater, rain catching on the fabric. She stared down the street away from the house, eyes scanning the shadows between parked cars and sloping lawns. "What are you doing here?" Luke called, the bat heavy in his hand. She turned at his voice. Her face was flushed breath visible in short white bursts. "Someone was at your door," she said. "I saw them from my car." "You were sitting in a car outside my house in the middle of the night," he said. "Why?" "I drive past sometimes," she said, "to make sure nothing looks off." "That is not an answer." "I was parked half a block down," she said, jerking her chin toward the bend in the road. "A figure came up your walk, dark jacket, hood up. They stood at your door. Then they heard my door open and ran." "Which way?" he asked. She pointed down the street toward the darker stretch where the streetlight did not reach. "I lost them behind the houses," she said. "They knew how to move." He came down off the porch, the bat still in his hand. "You expect me to just take your word for this," he said, "after everything." "I expect you to take the lock on your door seriously," she said. Her voice was low, but not soft. Whoever they were close enough to knock. Behind him, he heard the faint squeak of hinges. He turned. Mia stood in the doorway, hair-tangled fox clenched in both hands. The glow from her nightlight spilled around her like a small halo. "Dad," she said, "what is happening?" "Nothing," he said. "Go back to bed." She did not move. Her eyes slid past him to Claire under the streetlight. "It is you," Mia said. "From school, from the fence." Claire lifted her head and their eyes meeting. "You saw someone else today?" Luke asked, turning back to his daughter. Mia nodded, lips pressing together. "At recess," she said. "By the fence. Not Ms. Claire. A man. He watched through the holes. When I looked, he pretended to talk on his phone, but he was not saying words. His mouth was just moving. The bat creaked softly in Luke's grip. "You did not tell me that," he said. "I forgot until now," she whispered. Claire took a few steps closer, staying at the edge of the driveway. "How tall was he?" she asked, voice gentler. "Did you see his face?" Mia frowned, thinking. "Taller than my teacher," she said. "He wore a hat. I remember his shoes. They were black and shiny and did not match his jacket." She looked suddenly smaller, standing there in her nightshirt, talking about a stranger at the fence. Luke turned back to Claire. "If there is someone else," he said, "you need to stop talking in half sentences." She raised her hands slowly, palms out, as if walking up on a skittish animal. "There is someone else," she said. "I have been trying to figure out who they are and who they work for. They are careful. They have been tracking your routines longer than I have." "Why?" he asked. "Because of what your wife knew," she said. "Because of what the fire did not burn." The bat lowered a fraction without him noticing. "Inside?" he said over his shoulder to Mia. "Now." She hesitated, then backed into the house, face pressed to her chest, eyes never leaving Claire until the doorframe hid her. Luke stepped closer to the streetlight, the rain spotting his shirt. "If you know this much," he said, "then you do not get to keep me on the outside. Not anymore." Claire met his stare. "Then you need to hear things in the right order," she said, "and not standing in your driveway at midnight where anyone can watch us talk." The street around them was quiet, but the dark felt crowded. The porch light buzzed behind him. The streetlight hummed over her head. He glanced back at the house, at the thin lace of curtain in Mia's window, the glow behind it. The night settled heavier on Maple Falls. Luke did not go back to bed after Claire left. He sat in the kitchen with the bat across his knees until the clock on the oven crept past 1 in the morning and the coffee in his mug went cold. Every small sound in the house made him listen, the heater kicking on, the roof ticking as the rain eased, Mia turning over in her bed, the bed springs giving one soft protest. Around 4, exhaustion finally won. He stretched out on the couch without bothering to take off his jeans and closed his eyes. When he opened them again, the dim light through the blinds told him he had slept too long. The clock confirmed it, 7:30. Mia's bus left at 8. The morning became a blur of toast and teeth brushing and a hastily scribbled note to her teacher. Mia seemed quieter than usual, watching him as if measuring how much fear she was allowed. "Was it a bad person?" she asked at the door, fist tucked under her arm, backpack straps digging into her shoulders. "It was someone who decided they were not welcome," he said, "which is correct." She nodded, as if that lined up with the world she understood. She hugged him quickly and ran to catch the bus at the corner, the fox's tail bouncing against her side. He watched until the bus turned out of sight. Then he went back inside, rinsed his coffee mug with hands that did not feel entirely steady, and grabbed his keys. On the way to the garage, he noticed it again. A black SUV parked farther down the street just within the curve. It sat too neatly at the curb windows, tinted nose pointed toward the center of town. He had seen it before, in the school lot, 2 cars back at the grocery store, in his rearview mirror last week on the way back from the next town. At the time, he told himself Maple Falls did not have enough variety in cars to make every repetition suspicious. This morning, he did not tell himself that. He slowed as he passed. The SUV's engine was off. No one sat in the driver's seat that he could see. Water beaded on the hood and ran in thin streams down the sides. The plate was clean, no frame around it, no dealership logo, just the state name and a set of numbers and letters. He read them once under his breath, then again committing them to memory, feeling each character settle into place. At the garage, he flipped the sign to open, then headed straight to the small office and back. The computer took a full minute to wake its fan whining softly. While it loaded, he took out a pad of paper and wrote down the plate number before it could slip away. The county website could not tell him much. He knew that before he started. Private plate information did not live on the public side, but he also knew that Maple Falls was not the center of everything. Sometimes answers sat a few miles down the road behind a different counter. By mid-morning, with the first oil change of the day finished and an appointment rescheduled, he told his part-timer that he had an errand in the next town. "Business?" the kid asked. "Sort of," Luke said. He drove the 2-lane highway with one hand on the wheel and the other tapping lightly against his leg. The trees along the shoulders passed in a blur of dark trunks and wet needles. The sky stayed low. The county offices sat in a blocky concrete building that looked like it had landed in the middle of the older brick downtown by mistake. A parking lot wrapped around it, half filled with sedans and pickup trucks. Inside, the air smelled of paper and floor polish. Fluorescent lights reflected off linoleum, turning it into a dull mirror. He followed the signs to records and licensing. A tired-looking man with a striped tie sat behind the counter. A small brass name tag read Harris. "Help you?" Harris asked. Luke set the paper with the plate number on the counter. "I am trying to identify the registered owner of a vehicle," he said. "Black SUV, this plate." Harris glanced at the number, then at Luke. "We do not release that kind of information to the public," he said. "Privacy laws." Luke had expected the answer. He took a small breath, choosing his next words with care. "There was a stranger outside my kid's bedroom last night," he said. "Someone has been following us. That plate belongs to the car they keep using." Something in his voice or his eyes must have reached past procedure. Harris studied him a moment longer, then sighed. "You file a report with local law enforcement yet?" he asked. "Not officially," Luke admitted. "It would look better if you did." Harris tapped the paper. "I can tell you this much. That plate is not a personal registration. It is a corporate one." "Corporate," Luke repeated. "Company car. Looks that way." Harris reached for his keyboard fingers, moving with a reluctance that suggested he was talking himself into a gray area. "I can give you the name of the entity, that is all." "That is enough," Luke said. Harris typed, eyes flicking between the screen and the plate number. The monitor cast a pale glow on his face. "Greystone Risk Solutions," he read after a moment. "Seattle address. Status listed as dissolved, 3 years ago." "Dissolved," Luke said. "As in shut down." "Filed articles of dissolution with the state," Harris said. "No longer an active business." "What kind of business was it?" Harris scrolled down. "Private investigation and security consulting," he said. "Looks like they only had one major contract on record before they folded. Big dollar amount, no client name listed." "One contract," Luke said. "That is it." "On what I can access, yes." "Any names attached?" Luke asked. "Owner's officers." Harris hesitated, then turned the screen slightly, keeping it angled away but not completely. "Managing partner," he said, reading. "Eldon Marsh, legal liaison Claire Rowan." The name hit with an impact that felt both expected and new. Seeing it on a government computer made it more solid, harder to pretend away. "Rowan," Luke said. "As in Rowan Legal Services, Maple Falls." Harris glanced up again. "Same person looks like," he said. Luke let out a breath that shook a little. "All right," he said. "Thanks." "File that report," Harris advised. "If someone is following you, better to have a paper trail." Luke nodded. "I will." Outside, the air felt colder. He stood by his truck a moment, the word Greystone rolling around in his head. The name sounded like it belonged on a polished glass door in a city high-rise, not on a defunct corporate filing. He pictured Claire in her small upstairs office, with its rattling fluorescent light, and then the heavy cabinet with its secretive drawers. He drove back to Maple Falls without the radio on. In town, Main Street drifted through another slow afternoon. School would not let out for another hour. The diner had a few cars parked out front. The barber's pole turned lazily in the damp air. He parked near the corner and cut the engine. From here, he could see the narrow doorway that led up to Claire's office. The glass in the lower door caught reflections of the street, turning them into ghosts sliding across the surface. He waited. People passed, most of whom he recognized by shape, if not by name. A kid on a bike coasted by tires hissing on the wet pavement. Someone came out of the bakery with a white box and hurried to their car. At 4:10, the upstairs light behind the Rowan Legal sign flicked off. A few minutes later, the front door opened and Claire stepped out. She had changed since he saw her in the driveway. Dark slacks, a pale blouse under a raincoat, hair pulled into a tighter knot. From a distance, she looked like any professional leaving a long day at a modest office. She locked the door, checked it once, then turned toward the curb. He stepped from where he had been leaning on the truck and walked to intercept her. "Busy day at the dissolved company?" he asked. She stopped, keys in hand. Her eyes narrowed just enough to show she understood there would be no small talk. "Good afternoon to you too," she said. "Greystone Risk Solutions," he said. "That ring any bells?" Her expression did not change, but he saw it land, a shift inside behind the eyes. "You have been doing some research," she said. "County records," he said. "Corporate filings. They still remember your name in Seattle." She looked past him at the street, as if gauging who might hear. "Lower your voice," she said softly. "Why?" he asked. "Afraid the barber cares what you did for a living." "Afraid the wrong ears care?" she said. He stepped closer, close enough that the smell of rain on her coat reached him. "You worked for them," he said. "Legal liaison. One big contract, private security and investigations. Company dissolved 3 years ago. Same time my wife's case went sideways." "That is not a coincidence," she said. He almost flinched at how simply she said it. "So, what were you investigating?" he asked. Me, Julia, both of us. She looked him in the face, no flinching this time. A death benefit claim involving a house fire outside Seattle, she said. A young woman named Julia Porter, survived by her husband and minor child. The words were clean stripped of all the things that had actually happened in that space. Small black marks on white paper. You knew her name, he said. I knew her file, she said, at first. And then the file did not match the facts, she said. So I asked questions until someone told me to stop. Who? He asked. She did not answer that. He shook his head, a humorless sound in his throat. You had the whole picture from the start, he said. You knew about us before we knew you existed. Yet you come here and stand at fences like a stranger. If I had the whole picture, we would not be having this conversation on Main Street, she said. We would be somewhere with thicker walls. Cars passed behind him. A truck rumbled through the intersection, the sound rolling over them and receding. I call your car outside my house, he said. I saw your name in Greystone's filings. I saw my daughter in your cabinet. You are asking for a lot of trust from someone you have been watching from the dark. She let out a slow breath. I am not asking you to trust me, she said. I am asking you not to blow up what little structure there is by yelling in front of the post office. Then give me one straight thing, he said. Not half, not maybe. Something I can stand on. She looked at him for a long moment. The hard professional mask she had worn when he first stepped into her office shifted. It did not drop completely, but it thinned. If you push too fast and too publicly, she said, you will draw the attention of people who are better at this than I am, and they will not knock on your door. They will not send you warnings typed on nice paper. They will simply remove a problem. Which is me, he said. Which is you, she agreed. And Mia. The sound of his daughter's name in her mouth did something to his lungs. So what do you suggest? He asked. We take this off the street, she said. We talk where there are no windows facing the front. And I start giving you the parts I can without tipping the wrong scales. Her voice was steady now, but her hands had curled slightly on the strap of her bag. He could see the faint tremor in her fingers. You have been making decisions about my life for years, he said, from offices in other cities, and now from upstairs on my own Main Street. It is time I make one about you. He stepped past her to the curb and opened the truck door. I will pick up Mia, he said. After that, you are going to tell me exactly why my wife's death made it into a file at a private security firm. He climbed into the truck, slammed the door, and pulled out into the slow flow of Maple Falls traffic. The rearview mirror showed him a narrow woman on the sidewalk, coat lifting slightly in the breeze, watching him go. The sky was already leaning toward late afternoon when Luke pulled into the school lot. The low clouds had thickened, folding the mountains into a vague, dark line. Kids poured out of the building in noisy waves, jackets bright against the gray. He spotted Mia near the bike rack, standing with two other girls. The fox hung from the strap of her backpack like it was riding along. She saw the truck and waved, said something to her friends, then ran toward him, braids bouncing. You are a little early, she said as she climbed in. Miracles happen, he said. She buckled up, checked the fox's strap, then studied his face. Your eyebrows are doing the thing, she said. What thing? The tight thing, she said, scrunching her own brows together in imitation. When you are thinking about grown-up stuff and not telling me. He started the engine. I need to talk to someone about Mom, he said, keeping his eyes on the mirrors. An old friend of Miss Rowan. He might know things that can help. Is Ms. Rowan coming? She asked. Yeah, he said. She is the one who set it up. Mia considered that, then nodded once as if she were adding it to a mental file. Can we get fries if it is at a place that has fries? She asked. We will see, he said. He pulled out of the lot. As they turned onto the main road out of town, he glanced in the rear view. For a moment, he thought he saw the edge of a dark hood at the end of the block, a shadow where a person could stand. Then a passing car blocked his view. He pressed his foot a little harder on the gas. The diner Claire had chosen sat 15 miles down the highway, just past the junction that led toward the city. It was the kind of place that had seen decades of travelers and looked like it would see a few more. A low building with a long row of windows, a flickering sign that simply said, "Eat gravel," crunching under tires as he pulled in. Claire's sedan was already there, parked near the side. Another car, an old silver sedan with plates from the neighboring county, sat a few spaces away. Inside, the diner smelled of coffee, bacon grease, and syrup. The booths were red vinyl, cracked at the edges. A jukebox in the corner sat dark. A handful of truckers and a couple in hiking jackets occupied scattered tables. Claire stood when they came in. She was at a booth near the back, away from the windows. Opposite her, an older man with a thick head of white hair and a wool sport coat sat with his hands wrapped around a coffee cup. Mia tightened her grip on the fox and slid closer to Luke. "Luke," Claire said, "thank you for coming." "Not a lot of choice," he said. She did not argue. Instead, she turned slightly toward the man in the booth. "This is Judge Harold Klein," she said, "retired. He used to be my supervising partner in Seattle." Harold stood with a small effort. Close up, Luke could see that his hands trembled the way some older hands do, the tremor making the coffee in the cup quiver. "You must be Mr. Porter," Harold said. His voice had a rough edge, but there was a steadiness under it. "And this is Mia." Mia ducked half behind Luke's leg, then peeked out. "You can sit on this side," Claire said to her, patting the vinyl beside her, "if that is all right with your dad." Luke looked at Mia. She looked at Claire, then at him. At his slight nod, she climbed into the booth next to Claire Fox first, then swung her legs so they hung above the floor. Luke slid into the opposite side, facing Harold. The older man sat again, setting his cup down carefully in its ring of coffee on the table. A waitress appeared with menus, set them down, and poured more coffee without being asked. She smiled at Mia. "You want a cocoa sweetheart?" she asked. Mia looked at Luke. "One," he said, "and fries." Mia's face brightened just enough. Once the waitress left, silence settled over the table for a moment. The clatter of dishes and murmur of other conversations filled the spaces between them. Harold lifted his cup and took a measured sip. "Claire has told me some of what you have been dealing with," he said. "She also told me I should have done more sooner. I tend to agree." Luke watched him over his own coffee. "You were her boss," he said. "She was one of my best young attorneys," Harold said. "Sharp, stubborn, too honest for the kind of clients our firm had taken on." Claire looked down at the table. Luke rubbed his thumb over the ridge of the sugar packet in front of him. "And my wife?" he asked. "Where does she fit in this circle of regret?" Harold set his cup down carefully. "Julia worked for a corporation called Northbridge Dynamics," he said, "in their forensic accounting department. 6 years ago, she became involved in an internal review that was supposed to be routine. It was not. Northbridge." Claire had mentioned the name only once in passing in his office. Hearing it now from someone else made it more solid. "She found something," Luke said. "She found that Northbridge was systematically falsifying safety inspection reports on properties they owned or insured," Harold said. "Warehouses, parking structures, older apartment complexes, places where people lived and worked." He spoke plainly, but there was weight in his tone. He glanced once at Mia, then back at Luke. "When you fake an inspection report, you save money," Harold said. "You also increase the chance of things going very wrong. In this case, people had died. At least 3 that she could tie directly to negligent maintenance and doctored paperwork." Mia was busy making the fox stand up on the seat and then flop over, but Luke knew she was listening. "She gathered proof," Claire said quietly. "Spreadsheets, internal emails, copies of the original inspection reports before they were altered. She built a case in the way only a forensic accountant can." "And somebody noticed," Luke said. "Northbridge noticed," Harold said. "More specifically, the division that handles risk management and security. They realized she intended to act as a whistleblower, to go outside the preferred channels." Luke's hands were flat on the table now. His coffee sat untouched. "So they killed her," he said. His voice came out low, even more statement than question. Harold flinched almost imperceptibly. "They arranged for a fire," he said. "Officially, the fire was electrical and accident, an overloaded circuit. Unofficially, there were anomalies in the scene." "Anomalies," Luke repeated. "Points that did not line up with an accidental origin," Harold said. "Burn patterns, placement of accelerants, timing." "My wife burned in that house," Luke said. "Anomalies is a small word." There was a silence that hummed. Claire spoke, then her voice softer. "When the claim came into Silver Beacon, Northbridge was a major client," she said. "The insurer wanted the matter resolved quickly and quietly. They hired Greystone to assist. Greystone hired our firm to handle the legal side." "Her firm," Harold said. "Mine. I gave her the file because I trusted her to be thorough." Claire looked down, fingers tracing the damp ring under Harold's cup. "I read the reports," she said. "I read the fire marshal's conclusions. Then I looked at the photos, at the statements from neighbors, at the timelines. Things did not match. They rarely do when someone has edited them," Harold added. "I flagged the inconsistencies," Claire said. "I recommended deeper investigation. I was told that was outside our scope. I bushed meetings were called. Phrases like client relationship and risk exposure started showing up." Harold's mouth twisted. "This is where I should have done more," he said. "I should have backed her fully. Instead, I tried to keep a foot in 2 worlds. I warned her to tread carefully. She did not. That is a compliment, by the way. He looked at Claire with something like pride and regret mixed together. What happened? Luke asked. The partners told me to drop it, Claire said, to sign off on the settlement, to accept the accident narrative. They reminded me who paid our fees. When I refused, they reassigned the file. Within a week, I no longer had a job there. In my defense, Harold said quietly, I argued. I lost. Luke sat back slightly. The vinyl of the booth creaked under him. So, Northbridge buried the case, he said. Greystone closed up shop. My wife stayed a name in a report. And you moved to Maple Falls. Not right away, Claire said. First, I tried to do what I could from outside. I reached out to regulators, to contacts in the U.S. Attorney's Office. Without direct access to the evidence, I was another disgruntled former associate. The story did not travel far. The waitress arrived with Mia's cocoa and a plate of fries, breaking the tension for a moment. Mia thanked her and immediately dipped a fry into the cocoa, chewing thoughtfully. Do not let a year see you do that, Luke said to no one in particular. Harold managed a small smile, then reached into the inside pocket of his coat. There was one thing I could do, he said. Claire asked me to hold on to something, out of the formal channels. He pulled out a manila envelope, thick and slightly worn at the corners, as if it had been handled many times with care. He set it on the table between them. The front bore a red stamp in block letters. Confidential. Below that, in smaller print, someone had typed, Child Protective Target. Under those words in standard black type was a name, Amelia Rowan Porter. Luke's pulse jumped so hard he felt it in his throat. He read the name twice, eyes tracing each letter. Then he looked up at Harold. You put my daughter's name in a file like this, he said. His voice stayed quiet, but the air around the words felt thin. I did not create the designation, Harold said. It came from higher up, from a separate arm that reviews potential witnesses and dependents in sensitive matters. Claire flagged the risk. Someone somewhere decided your child fit a category. Target, Luke said. The word tasted metallic. It is a classification that can cut both ways, Harold said. Sometimes it means a person needs protection. Sometimes it means they are being monitored for leverage. Claire spoke, leaning in slightly. When I realized that Mia's name had been added to that system, she said, I panicked. Northbridge had already shown they were willing to remove obstacles. If they believed Julia left anything behind, anything that could hurt them, they would look at whoever was closest to her. Which is my daughter, Luke said. Which is your daughter, she agreed. Harold nudged the envelope toward him. Claire asked me to hold this, he said. She was too close to it, too visible. She told me that if things ever escalated around you, if there were signs that someone was watching you actively again, I was to give you the file and tell you everything I just told you. Luke did not reach for it right away. The envelope sat there quietly heavy, the manila surface reflecting a bit of the overhead light. Mia was lining up fries on a napkin, creating a little fence for the fox. She glanced up at the adults, sensing the thickening air, then looked back down as if deciding she did not want the shapes of these words yet. Why, whoa, Lukey asked. Why tonight in this place? Because someone is at your door again, Claire said. Because someone watched your child through a fence and pretended not to. Because Greystone did not dissolve into dust. The people who paid them found other ways to do business. Harold clasped his hands together on the table, the knuckles pale. And because I am old enough to be tired of carrying this by myself, he said. It belongs to you. It always did. Luke finally picked up the envelope. The paper was thick, edges a little softened. He slid a thumb under the sealed flap, but did not open it yet. Holding it was enough to change something in his chest. The grief he had been carrying for 6 years shifted, making room for something sharper. He slid the envelope into his jacket close to his body. Okay, he said. Claire watched him, her face unreadable, but her shoulders seemed to drop a fraction, as if some long tension had eased just enough to be noticeable. The waitress came by with the check. Harold waved his hand, telling her to put it on his tab. Mia ate another cocoa-dipped fry, unbothered by the adult world vibrating above her. Outside the diner windows, cars moved along the highway, their headlights cutting through the low, persistent mist. Inside the small booth, 3 adults and 1 child sat with a folded piece of manila that made the room feel smaller and the world beyond it feel darker. The call came late after Luke had tucked Mia in and stood for the usual minute watching her breathe. He had just turned off the hall light when his phone buzzed in his pocket. The display showed Claire's number. He almost let it go to voicemail. Instead, he stepped into the kitchen and answered. Yeah, we have to move, Claire said. Her voice was quiet but edged. There is an emergency hearing in Portland in the morning. Federal Courthouse, 9 sharp. About what? He asked. About who? She said. North Bridge, their security arm. One of their people is in custody. You need to be there. He gripped the back of a chair. Why me? He said. Because your wife is central to the charges, she said. And because Mia has seen the man they picked up. Multiple times. He thought of the dark figure at the fence, the man pretending to talk on a phone with his mouth, not making words. You are saying he works for the people who killed Julia, he said. I am saying his name has lived near hers in files for a long time, she replied. You do not have to testify, not yet. You just have to show up and see. Silence sat between them for a heartbeat. The ticking of the wall clock sounded louder. Bring Mia, she added. Both of you together. He almost said no. The word rose and hit the back of his teeth. Keeping Mia close and keeping her away from danger pulled in opposite directions. Is it safe? He asked. It is safer than staying in the dark, she said. The line clicked faintly as she shifted the phone. Judge Klein will be there, she added, and an assistant United States attorney I trust. This is not a trap, Luke. It is a door that finally swung open. He closed his eyes. The envelope inside his jacket in the other room felt heavier. 9, he said. We will be there. Morning came too early. They left before the sun had made up its mind, the highway stretching ahead in long, wet ribbons. Mia sat in the back seat by choice, the fox buckled beside her, chin resting on its head as she watched the trees go by. Is this a doctor place or a court place? She asked. Court, he said. He said. Grown-ups arguing with rules. Will there be metal detectors? She asked, oddly specific. Probably, he said. Cool, she murmured, and went back to watching the window. Portland rose out of the mist as a collection of taller shapes, bridges, and buildings cutting into the low sky. The federal courthouse was a glass and stone structure that looked clean and new, its entrance flanked by steps and a ramp. Flags snapped in the damp breeze. Inside, the air smelled like filtered water and carpet. A security line snaked toward metal detectors and uniformed guards. Luke emptied his pockets into a gray plastic tray. Mia slipped her backpack onto the conveyor belt. The detector beeped when he stepped through. A guard pointed at the buckle of his belt. He lifted his shirt unthreaded, the belt moved back through. This time it stayed silent. Mia watched the whole process with wide eyes. It is like the airport, she whispered. He took her hand and followed the signs to courtroom 3B. The room they entered did not match the courtroom in his head. It was smaller with no windows. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. The air conditioner hummed faintly in the vents, pushing out cool air that smelled of nothing. A few rows of wooden benches lined the back. At the front, a raised platform held a simple bench for the judge and a smaller desk for the clerk. 2 tables faced the bench, one on each side of the aisle. Claire stood at the table on the right in front of the seal of the United States hung on the wall. She was bent over a file, speaking in low tones to a tall woman in a navy suit with short silver hair and sharp eyes. When Luke and Mia stepped into the room, Claire looked up. The woman beside her followed her gaze. Claire straightened. You came, she said. Want to tell me what we are walking into? He asked, keeping his voice low. This is Assistant United States Attorney Elena Ruiz, Claire said. She is leading the case. Ruiz extended a hand. Her grip was firm, dry. Mr. Porter, she said, thank you for coming on short notice. Not sure I had much of a choice, he said. You always have a choice, she said. You chose not to ignore the situation. That counts for something. Her gaze shifted to Mia. And you must be Mia, she said. I like your fox. Mia drew the toy a little closer to her chest, but nodded. His name is Rocket, she said. Strong name, Ruiz said. You can sit in the front row if you like. That way you can see everything. Luke guided Mia to the first bench right behind the prosecution table. She climbed up, feet not touching the floor, and settled with the fox in her lap. Luke sat beside her. He could see Claire and Ruiz in profile, their files spread out, pens lined in a neat row. On the other side of the aisle, the defense table sat empty for now. A door opened near the front. The judge entered, robes, dark hair, thinning expression neutral. Everyone in the room rose. Luke stood too, Mia following his lead, small hand curled around his fingers. You may be seated, the judge said. They sat. The clerk called the case. The voice echoed a little in the windowless space. United States versus Ethan Cade. Luke felt his throat dry. A side door opened. 2 U.S. Marshals in dark jackets led a man through, one ahead, one behind. The man's hands were cuffed in front of him, a chain running down to the shackles at his ankles. He was in his early 50s maybe, with thinning gray hair combed back from a high forehead. His suit had been expensive once, but now it was wrinkled and shrugged across his shoulders like it did not quite fit. His face was narrow cheeks, hollowed slightly. Pale eyes scanned the room. They did not look confused. They did not look remorseful. They looked like someone assessing exits and angles. "This is a detention hearing," Ruiz said quietly over her shoulder, more for Luke than anyone else. "No witnesses today. Just arguments about whether he waits for trial at home or in a cell." The marshals guided the man to the defense table. A lawyer in a dark suit greeted him with a hand on the shoulder, then leaned close to speak. Mia's grip on Luke's fingers tightened. He felt it like a small vice. "That is him," she whispered. Her voice had thinned nearly air. "That is the man from the fence." "You are sure?" he whispered back. She nodded, eyes glued to the front. "He stood where the sun was behind him," she said. "At school. At the park. Today there is no sun, but it is still him." The man, Ethan Cade, turned his head slightly, scanning the gallery. His gaze slid over the rows until it hit the front bench. For a moment their eyes met. Luke felt something cold slide down his spine. Ethan's gaze moved past him and settled on Mia. His lips curved, not wide, not enough to show teeth. Just the faintest suggestion of a smile that did not touch his eyes. Mia's fingers dug into Luke's hand hard enough to hurt. "Look at me," Luke said softly. She tore her eyes away with effort and looked up at him. Her pupils were wide, skin pale. "It is okay," he said. "I am right here." Her lower lip trembled once, then steadied. The hearing preceded, words rising and falling at the front of the room. Ruiz argued in a clear, measured tone about risk of flight access to resources, history of intimidation. The defense attorney spoke of reputation, community ties, the presumption of innocence. The judge listened, expression unreadable. Luke heard phrases: conspiracy to commit arson, obstruction, possible witness tampering. He heard Julia's name once spoken in a formal cadence that made it sound like part of a line from a legal textbook. It scraped something in his chest. Claire said nothing, but her posture beside Ruiz was alert, ready. When Ruiz referenced internal memoranda from Northbridge's security division, Claire slid a document forward at exactly the right moment. At one point, the defense attorney argued that the government had not shown any direct threat to alleged surviving family members. Ruiz glanced back at Luke and Mia, then forward again. "We intend to show," she said, "that Mr. Cade has maintained an active pattern of surveillance on Mr. Porter and his minor child in the years since the fire. The presence of his vehicle and his person at the child's school and residence forms part of that pattern." Luke's heart thudded. The idea that someone had been quietly keeping track and writing it down made the world tilt. When it was over, the judge denied bail. Ethan Cade's jaw tightened, but he did not speak. The marshal stood and took his arms. As they led him past the prosecution table, he looked once more toward the front bench. His eyes brushed over Luke again, then settled a second on Mia. "So, that is the girl," he said, voice low, directed at no one in particular, "braver than her mother showing up." It was quiet enough that only the few people in the first rows heard. It was loud enough to move Luke's body before his mind caught up. He was halfway to his feet when a marshal stepped neatly between him and the aisle, one hand raised. "Sir," the marshal said, "stay seated." Luke's fingers had curled into fists. His vision had narrowed. He could see only Ethan's face and the easy way the man had said the word, mother. "Luke," Claire said, her voice cutting through the static in his head. "Mia." He looked down. Mia was staring up at him, eyes huge. His fist was still wrapped around her hand. He sat back down, slowly. The chains clinked as the marshals guided Ethan through the door. When it closed, the room exhaled. Ruiz gathered her files. "Come with us," she said to Luke and Mia. "There is a conference room down the hall where we can talk without him looking at anyone." The room they entered was small, with a long table and stackable chairs. A carafe of water sat on a sideboard beside a row of unused glasses. The fluorescent light buzzed here too softer. Mia climbed onto one of the chairs set rocket on the table and leaned into Luke's side. Within minutes, the adrenaline crash and the early morning caught up with her. Her head sagged against his arm. Her eyes slid closed. He eased an arm around her shoulders, easing her into a more comfortable angle. Claire and Ruiz sat across from him. Claire's hands were folded, fingers laced the knuckles pale. "His name is Ethan Cade," Ruiz said. "You heard that. Officially, he has spent the last 15 years as a private security consultant. Unofficially, he is the one corporations like Northbridge call when they have a problem they do not want to handle in the light." "The fire," Luke said. "Among other things," Ruiz said. "We are building a pattern. Your wife's death is not an isolated incident. It is one of several events that benefited Northbridge directly after inconvenient people raised inconvenient truths. Claire spoke, her voice quiet but steady. When I started digging into the inconsistencies in Julia's case, she said, Ethan's name kept showing up in connection with contractor payments and internal memos. It was never front and center, but it was always somewhere on the page. Ethan coordinated with Greystone, Ruiz added. They outsourced parts of their surveillance and cleanup work. That is how Ms. Rowan ended up in the middle of it on the legal side. Luke's eyes went to Claire. You were working for a law firm, he said. How did you go from writing memos to watching my kid on a playground? I resigned before they could fire me, she said. Then I tried to bring what I knew to people like Miss Ruiz. Without hard proof, I was just noise. Meanwhile, Greystone shuddered. Northbridge shifted their operations. The only thread that stayed constant was you and Mia. Why stay constant, he asked. They got what they wanted. Julia is gone. They do not believe she left the world empty-handed, Ruiz said. Multiple witnesses reported that Julia had been making copies of her files. Northbridge suspects she hid a backup of her evidence somewhere they cannot access. Somewhere that might still be discovered. Somewhere around us, Luke said. That is their fear, Ruiz said. People like Ethan do not like loose ends. Children are both vulnerable and in some twisted minds repositories of secrets they do not even know they carry. He looked down at Mia asleep against him, the fox trapped gently under her arm. So, he has been circling us, Luke said, waiting to see if something surfaces. Watching your routines, Claire said. Your drives, your habits, trying to figure out where Julia would have left something she wanted you or Mia to find when the time was right. What got him arrested? Luke asking. If he has been doing this for years, why did you pick him up now? Ruiz poured herself a glass of water, then set the pitcher down. A different case finally gave us the hook we needed, she said. Another witness, another incident. Once he was in custody, I pressed for us to fold the Northbridge matters into the same umbrella. Miss Rowan's documentation helped. Claire nudged a thin folder across the table. Some of what is in your envelope, Judge Klein's envelope, overlaps with what Miss Ruiz has, she said. Not all. They have different origin points. Together they form enough of a map that the government could move. Luke's mind went back to the manila envelope in his jacket. He had not opened it yet. It had sat against his ribs like a promise and a threat. Why make Mia see him, he said, today, in that room, so that if we need her identification later, it is not built on photographs alone, Ruiz said. And so you understand how real this is. Not as a story, but as a man in a chain who smiled at your child. Claire's jaw tightened. I did not want her anywhere near him, she said, but pretending he does not exist has not kept him away from her fence. The room went quiet. The hum of the vent filled the space their words left. Luke looked down at his daughter again. Her mouth had relaxed in sleep lashes resting on her cheeks. The fox's stitched eyes stared at the ceiling. Northbridge, he said slowly. Greystone, Ethan Cade, all of you have had pieces of this. You built files. You stamped things confidential. Meanwhile, my kid drew houses with smoke on every scrap of paper in our home. Claire's eyes closed for a second, then opened again. You are right, she said. We took too long to bring you into the center of it. Ruiz did not argue. But we are here now, Ruiz said, and the man who carried out the fire that killed Julia Porter is in custody. He is not outside your window tonight. That is not nothing. Luke did not trust his voice, so he nodded once. Ruiz stood. I have another hearing across the hall, she said. You are free to go when you are ready, or you can sit here as long as you need. She exchanged a look with Claire, then left the door closing softly behind her. In the quiet that followed, Claire reached into her bag and took out a folded scrap of paper. I should have given you this sooner, she said. It is my card. The number on the back goes directly to me. Anytime, day or night. He took it and slid it into his pocket alongside the envelope. Mia shifted against his side and murmured something unintelligible, then went still again. Luke leaned his head back against the cool wall. The fluorescent light hummed overhead. Somewhere in the building a door opened and closed, footsteps echoing briefly in a hallway he could not see. They drove back from Portland in a kind of quiet that did not feel like peace. Mia slept most of the way, her head against the window, the fox wedged between her cheek and the glass. Traffic moved around them, headlights streaking in the wet afternoon, but the cab of the truck felt closed off from all of it. At home, life tried to settle into its old grooves. School, the garage, dinner at the small table with the nickel surface. But something in the pattern had changed. Luke checked the locks twice at night. He parked the truck closer to the house. When Mia played in the yard, he watched from the porch with one eye on the street. The black SUV did not appear the next few days. That almost felt worse. On Thursday, he had a follow-up appointment with Claire. She wanted to go over the insurance file again, this time with what Ruiz's office had dug up on Silver Beacon and Northbridge. He picked Mia up from school on the way. "Do I have to go?" she asked as she climbed into the truck. "Only for a little while," he said. "You can draw. Ms. Rowan has good paper." "She has loud lights," Mia said. "They are not that loud. They hum," she said, "like bees." He could not argue with that. Upstairs in the office, the hum of the fluorescent tubes was exactly as she remembered. So was the faint smell of coffee and dust. Claire had a stack of folders on her desk and a second chair pulled up beside it, as if expecting him to stay longer this time. "Come in," she said. "I asked for some additional documents from the carrier. They are not pretty, but they confirm a lot of what we thought." Mia dropped herself into the same worn leather chair in the corner and dug in her backpack. The Fox came out first, then a handful of crumpled papers and a pencil without an eraser. The Fox's side seam had started to come loose. A thin line of stuffing puffed out along one flank like a small white cloud. "Rocket is broken," Mia announced, frowning down at him. "Where?" Lukey asked. "Here." She pressed her thumb along the tear. More stuffing bulged out. "He is leaking." "You want me to fix it when we get home?" he asked. "You are bad at sewing," she said without malice. She looked over at Claire. "Do you have a needle?" she asked. "You have all the other grown-up things." Claire glanced up from the file she was opening. For a second there was surprise in her face, then something softer. "I might," she said. "Let me check." She crossed to a small cabinet near the window and slid open a drawer. Inside were office supplies, paper clips, a roll of tape, a plastic box with a hotel sewing kit inside. She opened the box, took out the tiny paper pouch, and held up a thin needle and a short length of white thread. "Will this work?" she asked. "Yes," Mia said. "Bring him here." Mia approached the desk and set Rocket on the blotter, as carefully as if she were putting a real animal on an operating table. The little fox lay on its side, one ear flattened the rip along its seam, clearly visible. Claire threaded the needle in 3 quick movements. Her hands were steady, practiced. She knelt slightly so she was closer to Mia's eye level. "When did this happen?" she asked. "Siegt?" "Yesterday," Mia said. "He got caught on my desk corner." "That will do it," Claire said. She eased the seam open a fraction more so she could tuck the stuffing back inside. As she did, the needle snagged on something that did not feel like cotton. She frowned and touched the inside of the fox's belly with 2 fingers. Something small and hard pressed against her skin. Not the smooth bead of a plastic eye, more like the flat edge of metal. Her eyes lifted to Luke's, a question forming there. Then she glanced at Mia. "Feels like he ate something," she said lightly. "Mind if I check what it is?" "I did not feed him anything," Mia said, "except fries." "This is not fries," Claire said. She took the small scissors from the pencil cup, snipped one stitch, then another. The seam opened enough for her to slip 2 fingers inside and pinch the hard object. She drew out a tiny brass key on a short stem. It glittered dully in the office light, edges smoothed by time and fabric. Mia's mouth fell open. "He did eat something," she said. "He is a thief." Claire turned the key in her hand. It had a stamped number on one side, and on the other the name of a bank in Seattle. Luke's stomach dropped. "That is a safe deposit key," he said. Claire nodded once slowly. Her face had gone very still. "There is something else," she murmured. She reached back into the Fox and fished out a scrap of paper that had been folded into a tight, narrow packet. The paper was soft at the edges from being carried next to stuffing for a long time. She unfolded it carefully on the desk. The handwriting on it was familiar to Luke, in a way that made his chest hurt. Looped letters, a small tilt to the right. He had seen that hand on grocery lists, on notes stuck to the bathroom mirror, on birthday cards. "For my clever Fox," the note read, "when the smoke clears you will know." The room narrowed for him, the edges going slightly soft. For a moment, the hum of the lights faded, and all he could hear was his own breath. He reached out and touched the paper with one finger, as if making sure the ink would not smear. "Julia wrote this," he said. Claire looked up at him. There was no need for her to confirm it. Mia stared from the key to the note and back again. "She meant me," Mia whispered. "Right?" Luke swallowed. "Yeah," he said. "She did." Claire turned the key in her fingers again, then set it gently on the note, the metal making a small, dull tap. "This bank is downtown," she said. "Main branch. They have boxes in their basement vault." "She opened a box under Mia's name," Luke said. "Probably in that last week before the fire." "It would fit," Claire said. She was moving her evidence. She knew her own life was at risk. Putting it in a box tied to her daughter would make it harder to erase completely. Luke felt a rush of something that was part grief, part anger, part fierce, late-blooming respect. She used our kid as a lock, he said. More like a key, Claire said. She pushed the small brass key across the desk toward him. And now the person that key belongs to is old enough to walk into the bank. Mia reached for the fox, which still lay on its side with its stitches loose. Is he okay? She asked. We will sew him back up, Claire said. Her voice softened. He just had something important to tell us first. They did not wait. There were things that could have been done, calls that could have been made, but none of them felt as urgent as the small piece of metal on the desk. Within an hour, they were driving into Seattle, the skyline rising under a low ceiling of clouds. The city felt bigger than Luke remembered. Taller, louder, the streets more crowded. He had not liked coming here after the fire. Too many corners held echoes. The bank was a stone-fronted building that had stood through several redesigns. New glass doors had been fitted into an older frame. Brass handles gleamed from polishing. Inside, the ceilings were high, the air cooler than the gray afternoon. A security guard near the entrance watched them walk in. He glanced at Mia's fox but did not say anything. At the information desk, Claire handled the conversation. She produced her card, spoke calmly about a safe deposit box, about a minor account holder, about a key discovered in a deceased client's effects. The teller's polite expression did not fully hide her curiosity, but she picked up the phone and called downstairs. Mr. Porter, Claire said quietly, do you have Mia's birth certificate with you? He did not. It was in a metal lockbox back at the house, part of the small cache of documents he had grabbed when he left Seattle for good. His stomach clenched. Claire seemed to read the worry on his face. I have a certified copy in our case file, she said. Ms. Ruiz had me pull it. I scanned it. It is on my laptop. She looked at the teller. Would a digital copy suffice with additional ID from the Guardian? She asked. The teller hesitated, then nodded. If the vault manager approves, she said. A few minutes later, a man in a dark suit with a badge clipped to his belt appeared. He shook Luke's hand, then Claire's. His name was Keller. He had the cautious look of someone whose job involved both access and suspicion. You are saying you have the physical key, a miner's name, and a certified birth record matching that name, he said, but you do not have the original rental agreement. The primary renter is deceased, Claire said. We can produce a death certificate as well. The circumstances are part of an ongoing federal investigation. She showed him a letter on her phone crest from the U.S. Attorney's Office, at the top Ruiz's signature at the bottom. Keller read it carefully, his eyes narrowing slightly, then gave a small nod. All right, he said. We will proceed with a note in the log. He led them past the main counters through a side door and into a hallway that sloped gently downward. The air grew cooler and drier. The walls shifted from painted plaster to plain concrete. At the end of the hall, another door opened into the vault area. Steel lined the walls. Safety deposit boxes filled the space like a grid, each with 2 keyholes. The vault smelled faintly of metal and paper and something else that had no name, the scent of stored secrets. Keller consulted a ledger, then moved along one wall, counting rows. Here, he said. He indicated a box at eye level. One keyhole would take the bank's master. The other waited for the small brass key in Claire's hand. She handed it to Luke. This is yours, she said. He took it. The metal was cold and heavier than it looked. His fingers did not feel entirely steady. Mia stood on his other side, fingers hooked into his jacket. Her eyes were wide, not with fear now, but with a strange focused curiosity. Can I help? She asked. He looked down at her, at the way she craned her neck to see. You can put your hand on mine, he said. She nodded and placed her small hand over his. Together they slid the key into the second lock. Keller used his own longer key in the first. There was a metallic clunk inside as mechanisms aligned. He pulled the handle. The box slid out on runners, long and shallow like a drawer. He set it on a small shelf that jutted from the wall. I will give you some privacy, he said. When you are finished, let me know before you leave the vault. He stepped back through the door and pulled it almost closed. The vault felt smaller. Once he was gone, the air closer. Luke looked at the gray metal box. His palms were damp. For a moment, he saw it as a coffin, long and narrow. He pushed the thought away. Claire stood on his other side, watching his face more than the box. Whenever you are ready, she said. He slid the lid back. Inside, everything was arranged with careful, almost obsessive neatness. Manila folders, a small stack of printouts clipped at the corners, a slim flash drive in a clear plastic case. And on top of it all, a photograph. He picked up the photo first. Julia stood on their old front porch, sunlight behind her. She had one hand on the railing, the other resting on the top of Mia's head. Mia, younger by years, wore the same yellow dress from the impossible picture in Claire's cabinet. The fox was newer fur, brighter. Julia's smile was the one she had worn when she thought no one was taking a picture. Relaxed, private, a little crooked. His eyes burned. He blinked and set the picture down gently on the edge of the box. He picked up the flash drive next. It was unmarked except for a small piece of tape on one side, Julia's handwriting again. NBD files, it read. Final copy. Claire inhaled sharply at the abbreviation. Northbridge Dynamics, she said. She backed up everything here. Luke set the drive next to the photograph and reached for the folders. The tabs bore dates and short labels in that same looped script. Building 14 fire. Parking level collapse. Email threads risk division. Internal audit summary. He flipped one open. Inside pages of spreadsheets, colored flags marking certain columns. On another page, an email chain with names and time, stamps the language clipped, and corporate arguing about cost exposure and acceptable losses. Mia peered at the papers, not really reading, just taking in the density of the text. This is all Mom's writing, Luke said. She did this at our kitchen table. I thought she was just working late. She was building a case, Claire said. There was a catch in her voice. She hid the final draft where she hoped no one would think to look. In her kid's toy, Luke said. He looked down at Mia. She was tracing a finger along the edge of one page, stopping at a name she could not quite sound out. She trusted you, he said to her, even when you were 3 and could not read your own name. Mia frowned. Is she in trouble for hiding things? She asked. No, he said. She is the reason we have something to fight with at all. They stood there a while longer, the weight of Julia's preparation filling the narrow space of the vault. Papers rustled quietly as they thumbed through enough to understand the scope, not enough to finish. Eventually, Keller knocked lightly on the doorframe. Everything all right? He asked. Luke nodded. We need to remove these, Claire said, indicating the folders and the drive. They will become part of a federal case. Keller studied the stack, then the letter on Claire's phone again. As long as we log that the box has been opened and its contents transferred to authorities, the bank is covered, he said. They signed what he put in front of them. Keller watched as Claire slid the drive and the main folders into her bag. The photograph and the note went into the inside pocket of Luke's jacket over his heart. Outside, the city sounded different. Car horns, voices, the whine of a bus's brakes. The air smelled of rain on concrete and roasted coffee from a cart nearby. Mia held Rocket tight, the stitches on his side, now neat and new, the scar of thread visible if you knew where to look. What now? She asked. Identificados testigos. Luke looked at the bank's glass doors, at the reflection of the 3 of them standing together on the sidewalk. For the first time since the fire, he felt like the image might belong to something more than survival. The trial started in spring, when the trees along the river finally showed a hint of green. Portland felt less gray then, but the federal courthouse looked the same inside, all stone and glass and cool, recycled air. Luke knew the way to courtroom 5A by then. He and Mia had walked that corridor enough times to recognize the scuff on the baseboard by the elevator, the framed print of a mountain above the water fountain, the way the light from the atrium turned the polished floor into a faint mirror under their shoes. On the first full day of testimony, Mia wore a blue dress and her battered sneakers. Rocket rode in her backpack, only his ears showing above the zipper. Luke wore the same suit he had bought for a cousin's wedding years ago. It fit differently now. They took their usual place in the front row of the gallery. Claire sat at the table with Ruiz files neatly stacked, a yellow legal pad waiting in front of her. On the other side, Ethan Cade's attorney had his own tidy pile of papers, his client in a fresh gray suit beside him, still in cuffs when the marshals brought him in, not in cuffs when they came off for the jury to see. He did not look around as much this time. When he did, his gaze slid over the benches and kept moving. The faint half-smile was gone. The government put on its case piece by piece. A former facilities manager from one of Northbridge's properties testified about pressure to sign off on inspection checklists he knew were incomplete. His hands shook as he pointed out his own signature on blown-up copies of forms, the ink dark under the courtroom lights. A woman in a neat blazer and simple gold necklace described a parking garage collapse in another state. Her brother had been in his car on the lower level when the ceiling came down. She spoke quietly, each word precise. Then came spreadsheets, charts, photos of charred beams and warped wiring. Ruiz walked the jury through them, not lingering, not rushing, letting the pattern form. Claire took the stand on the fourth day. She wore a dark suit and a white shirt, buttoned all the way up. As she walked to the witness box, Luke saw her hesitate for half a beat at the bottom of the steps, like someone about to dive into cold water. Then she went up, hand on the rail, and took the oath. Ruiz started with her credentials: law school, the firm in Seattle, the types of cases she had handled, the work with Greystone. Then they turned to Julia, the file, the first time Claire saw the words Porter Julia on a tab, the reports that did not match the photos, the timeline that had gaps in it where there should have been none, the conversations in hallways outside conference rooms where partners told her to let it go. What did you do when you were instructed to stop asking questions about the fire at the Porter residence? Ruiz asked. I resigned, Claire said. Her voice carried clearly steady. Did you stop asking questions after you left the firm? No, she said. They put the photograph from the safe deposit box on the screen, the one of Julia and Mia on the porch. They put up copies of the emails Julia had saved, the ones highlighting risk and falsified reports. Next to those came internal memos from Northbridge's security division, signed by people who were not in the room, but whose names now sat in front of 12 jurors. Ethan watched all of it with a face that barely moved. Harold Klein testified as well, slower up the steps, voice catching now and then. He admitted the firm's failures without prettying them. He described the day he wrote Child Protective Target on the envelope that had lived in his coat for years and how heavy it had felt in his pocket. The bank manager from Seattle talked about procedures for opening a safe deposit box, about how the record showed that a box had been opened under Mia's name 6 years earlier by Julia Porter, with fees paid in cash up front. Keller from the vault described the contents of that box and the process for turning them over to federal authorities. The jury watched Mia sometimes when those details came up. She felt it and slid her hand into Luke's, her palm small and warm. Luke did not take the stand. Ruiz said she had enough without putting him through a cross-examination that would pick at grief as if it were a legal argument. He sat in the gallery and listened to other people say his wife's name. When the defense's turn came, they tried to narrow the story. They talked about electrical faults, about reasonable doubt, about how a corporation could not be held responsible for every decision made by individuals in its employ. They painted Ethan as a consultant who followed orders, not someone who shaped them. On cross, Ruiz walked Ethan through a series of payments and travel records, locations and dates lined up with the fires and accidents on their chart. He deflected where he could, said he did not recall, said he was just there to assess risk. When she asked him directly about the night of Luke's fire, his mouth flattened. I am not here to talk about that, he said. You are here to answer my questions, Ruiz replied. Her tone did not change. Did you visit the Porter residence in the weeks before the fire? He looked past her toward the bench, then toward the far wall. I consulted on multiple incidents that year, he said. I would have to see the file. We have the file, Ruiz said. The jury will see it, even if you say you do not remember. He did not look at Luke or Mia once during his time on the stand. That absence of eye contact was its own kind of answer. The trial lasted 4 weeks. Every evening they drove back to Maple Falls or stayed in a cheap hotel when the schedule ran late. Mia did homework at diner tables and in hotel lobbies, Rocket always near his new stitches holding. On the day of the verdict, the courtroom felt charged. The jury filed in, faces guarded. The foreperson stood, a folded paper in hand. Guilty, he said, on all counts. Luke heard the words, but what he felt was the sudden release of air in his chest, as if he had been holding his breath for years without knowing it. Mia squeezed his hand hard, then let go and wiped her face with the back of her sleeve. Ethan did not react visibly. The cuffs went back on. The marshals led him away through the door he had come through so many times. Northbridge was not on trial in that room, not as a person. Corporations usually are not. But within weeks, news came of indictments for 3 of its executives. Civil suits followed. The systems that had protected them began to grind in a different direction. For Luke and Mia, the immediate shift was quieter. No more black SUV in the curves near their street. No more thin figures behind schoolyard fences. Spring deepened. The trees in Maple Falls filled out. The river ran faster with snowmelt. The night still came and locks still clicked, but the dark outside the windows felt less crowded. On the last day in Portland after the sentencing hearing, where Ethan received years that sounded like a number and not a comfort, they stepped out of the courthouse into hard white sunlight. The granite steps were warm under Luke's hand as he rested it on the rail. People moved in loose clusters, lawyers with their jackets off, Reporters with microphones and cameras, most of them already turning to other stories. Mia stood between him and Claire Rocket under her arm, ears more thread than fabric now. The fox's seam was solid, the new stitches a slightly different color than the original cloth. "Is it over?" Mia asked. "No," Claire said. "Not everything, but this part is." Mia seemed to accept that. She tilted her head back and squinted at the slice of blue sky between buildings. "What about Ms. Rowan?" she asked. "Is she going back to the big city now that all the yelling is done?" Claire glanced at Luke, then at the street. Her hair had come loose from its knot, a strand sticking to her cheek in the breeze. "I have an offer," she said. "A small firm in Maple Falls. They handle local cases. Nothing as loud as this. They could use someone who knows how to argue with bigger shadows." "You are staying," Mia said. Not a question somehow. "If your dad does not mind one more stubborn person in town," Claire said. Luke looked at her. Not the witness, not the lawyer standing by the seal, not the silent figure by the fence. Just a woman standing on courthouse steps with the sun in her hair and a faint, tired line at the corner of her mouth. "We are not great at letting people in," he said, "but we are trying." A small smile touched her face, the first real one he had seen that was not worn like armor. "Trying is a start," she said. Mia reached out and took one of Claire's hands without ceremony, Rocket tucked in the other. The gesture pulled them into a closer circle, the three of them standing shoulder to shoulder for a moment on the stone. Down on the sidewalk, a bus hissed as it pulled to the curb. Someone laughed. A car radio played a song from an open window. The world went on. They walked down the steps together. At the bottom, Mia darted ahead chasing a pale butterfly that had wandered in from a patch of ornamental flowers. She followed it across a patch of sunlight, her laugh carrying back to them. Luke and Claire kept pace behind her, not touching but matched in stride. "Thank you," he said, not looking at her at first, "for not walking away when everything told you to." "Thank you," she answered, "for believing me late rather than never." He let that sit. Glass doors reflected their backs as they moved away from the courthouse, turning them into faint figures layered over the sky. For once, the reflection did not feel like something watching. It felt like a picture from a distance, small and harmless. Mia caught the edge of the butterfly's path and spun under it, arms lifted. The fox's stitched side flashed once in the light, a brief line across faded fabric. Scars, Luke thought, did not make things less real. They marked where something had torn and then held. He opened the truck door. Mia scrambled in Rocket going ahead of her. Claire hesitated by the curb. "You sure about the small firm?" he asked. She nodded. "Big firms do not do well with people who cannot pretend certain things never happened," she said. "I have tried that." He understood that more now than he had before. Mia leaned over the seat. "Come over for spaghetti when you move," she said. "Dad burns the sauce sometimes, but it still tastes good." "I will keep that in mind," Claire said. She stepped back onto the sidewalk, watched them pull away, her figure shrinking in the mirror until the curve of the street took her out of sight. On the drive back to Maple Falls, the sun broke through the clouds in patches, turning the wet road ahead into bands of bright silver. Mia sang quietly in the back seat, inventing verses about foxes and keys and secret boxes, the words tumbling together in a way that made sense to her. Luke kept his hands steady on the wheel, eyes on the lines, a weight in his chest that had changed shape. The grief was still there. It probably always would be, but threaded through it now was something else, something that felt, if not light, then at least less heavy. The town came into view, small and familiar. The garage, the school with its fence, the street with his leaning porch and its narrow windows. He parked in the driveway and turned off the engine. For a second he sat there listening to the ticking of the cooling hood, the distant sound of a dog barking, the low rush of the river in the distance. "Home," Mia said behind him. He looked back at her. She hugged Rocket close, the fox's stitched side pressed to her arm. "Home," he agreed. They stepped out into the cool afternoon. The air smelled of damp earth and fir trees. Somewhere a neighbor's chimney sent up a thin thread of smoke that curled harmlessly into the sky. Thank you so much for listening to today's story. If this story resonated with you or made you reflect, I'd love to hear your thoughts, so feel free to share them in the comments below. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you won't miss the next story.